welcome everyone to tonight. Really interesting news I found it, so I'm really looking forward to this interview. Not personally, just the whole private foundations has been hit hard. You've actually been predicting it for a while, Warren, and I'm really looking forward to getting your thoughts on this because you've been saying it probably for the last 2 years, I would say, maybe a year and a half, 2 years or so, that the ATO were always going to come after private foundations, and people who have a private foundation and not operating correctly are going to get targeted and be hit when they're least expecting it. So it's going to be a really interesting space. And then here we are, like a week ago or so, the ATO publicly announced that they're going to be looking and investigating into private foundations. And there'd be plenty of people tuning in today who would be in that situation, I'm sure, looking for solutions around it and all that. But we'll get into that shortly. So anyway, before we get started, you're obviously in Bali, so how's that going for you?
Look, it's great. Just been really relaxing. A lot of awareness, a lot of change, a lot of, just really not doing an awful lot, just chilling out, exercising, reflecting heavily on life in the world. It's probably the best way to describe it right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like it's always like that when you go on holidays. It's always a good time to reflect and just relax and wind down a little bit.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But anyway, we'll get straight into it just because there's quite a few questions to go through and it's a big topic. But before we get started, I'm always just interested to hear where people are listening in from, just because we've got a wide range of people, a lot of names who seem relatively new. So if everyone could just type in the comments where you're tuning in from, like which state in Australia, if you're overseas at the moment, just type in where you're tuning in from. So Melbourne, you're obviously in Bali, Warren, so got a bit of a change up there. Byron, Gold Coast, Shark Bay, WA, Albany, Barwon Heads, Mid-North Coast, New South Wales. Got James private messaging me being from WA, Melbourne. So yeah, quite a few states. Melbourne there seems to be more people coming in from Victoria than usual. So it's interesting to see quite a few Victorians here. New South Wales as well, Sydney, Bermagui. I think that's how you pronounce it. I don't know why, that always gets me. I think that's how you pronounce it though. But yeah, quite a wide range of people. I'm obviously from WA, so really good to see. Welcome guys to today. So for those of you that aren't as familiar with what we're going to be talking about today, or those who joined late, pretty much today's session is going to be focused on the recent announcement that came from the ATO, which was around they're going to be investigating further into private foundations. Warren has actually been predicting this for about the past 2 years, I would say. And it's going to be really interesting because people who have set up their finances and set up their asset protection through private foundations, which go against the whole government movement and whatnot, it's going to get dirty. And you've said that for quite a while. It's going to get ugly for a lot of people in this situation and people who haven't been set up correctly. So we'll get straight into it. The first question that I want to ask you is, why do you believe that ATO is actually cracking down on private foundations? I think most people would know the answer to that, but in your opinion, why are they doing? Like, are there any major objectives as to why they want to do it?
Oh, it's just common sense. I'm amazed they didn't do it beforehand. Basically, it's like saying to a mafia group, look, you're not allowed to, we don't acknowledge your jurisdiction. It's not legal. And therefore we're going to do this, and which means they won't get their money anymore. And the mafia is not going to say, oh, okay, yeah, that's a fair point. They're going to send someone after you. So the ATO is basically wants to collect this revenue. It's got a system which requires registration of foundations in what's called the public arena. And if people don't go into it and then say, well, we don't acknowledge your jurisdiction, well, it comes down to, A, will the ATO accept that? And they're going to be like, no. But number, if they don't accept it, what are they going to do about it? Well, it's going to cost them money. I mean, if everyone in Australia started suddenly setting up private foundations and going outside the system and doing that, they wouldn't get any money coming in. So it's just a commercial decision like everything. It's why COVID went crazy. It's why banks start wars and working with governments and create wars, because wars make governments very, very rich. And They make banks very, very rich, and they make everyone very, very rich other than the people who get killed and all kinds of other horrible things happening to them. So it's the same kind of thing. Like the tax office is what pays the national debt. It pays the interest to the European banks, and the IMF and the Rothschilds and all those guys. It pays the whatever social services or government stuff and contributes to the common good, supposedly. So yeah, we're not going to sit there and just let people do it. And like I said, I'm just astounded how long they've let it go on for. The only conclusion I can think of is that there's so many people doing it, and most people aren't really making a lot of money from it. They haven't bothered so much. That's been, because when they have gone after them, they've won every single case in court. So yeah, it's just, I'll be surprised if they don't go really hard, to be honest. So just from what I know, and having worked in the ATO many years ago, and I was an auditor and all that, and I always saw that they would generally wait a while and then they would go after something like this because they get more money. So that's probably the only reason they would probably delay, because now lots of people are doing it. So there's plenty of money to be collected.
So do you think they're going to strike hard really quickly, like right now, or do you think they'll give it a bit of time to go after it?
Well, I was saying in the bikie community, Ed, revenge is a dish best served cold. In other words, make people stew. So government wheels turn slowly, but when they hit hard, So I think it will just be bit by bit. You'll just start seeing it coming out. They'll just start putting notices, looking at different people. Because how far they go, I don't know. I think that what they normally do is find the biggest promoters and they target them. The few little ones are just doing their own little bits here and there will probably slip under the radar. But ones who've purchased the mass promoted private foundations, yeah. If I had one of those, I'd be shutting it down in record time.
Yeah. And so how do you actually know if it's a private foundation? How will they be able to tell them? I mean, I'm assuming it'd be relatively straightforward, but what's the general criteria to actually identify a private foundations that's not complying with government's tax obligations?
Oh, look, it's just simply, is it registered with the ATO and the Charities Commission or not? If the answer is no, then it's private. If it is, then it's public.
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward then. And pretty straightforward. So
what the Tax Act says that all foundations which want charitable tax exempt status have to be registered first with the ACNC, Charities Commission, and then with the ATO.
So following on from that then, what actually are some common areas of non-compliance, apart from obviously ticking the no box where it's not registered with ACNC and the Charities Commission? What areas are there of which indicates non-compliance that are going to be found in private foundations from this whole ATO crackdown?
Look, it depends on why you're using the private foundation. I mean, if you're not trying to get out of tax, you can do whatever you want, really. With that, the ATO wouldn't care. I mean, if you set up a private foundation and put money into it and bought asset protection, they wouldn't care. That wouldn't bother them. It's when you're, say, receiving your income from your job or from your business and claiming it's tax exempt because it's a foundation, that's when they care. So the common area of non-compliance comes down to that. So basically the tax compliance and things like that. So is it, why are you doing it? Are you trying to get out of paying taxes or some other reason? If it's some other reason, then the ATO is like, fine, yeah, no, all good, we don't mind. If it's about tax compliance, then yeah, there's a problem.
So even through this investigation, they're only really interested in targeting people who are using it to evade tax or...
Absolutely. Yeah, look, unfortunately, many promoters have a lot of... They're going to target promoters, I think, especially heavily, like the people who actually set them up, because they passed some promoter penalty law some years ago to stop people promoting massive tax avoidance stuff. And so I think that's what they're going to target heavily because, they don't like it when people are promoting this. And I must say, I think most promoters or private foundations should hang their heads in shame, because many of them just do it. They tell people this, but they don't tell them the full story. They don't tell them that the ATO doesn't actually accept it. And so people just assume that, oh, yeah, it works.
So if you had a private foundation yourself then, and you weren't using it to evade tax, you were more using it for asset protection and the benefits you mentioned they don't really care about, would you still be nervous with this investigation, or you'd be pretty much peaceful?
No, it's fine because private foundations are common across the world. You know, like Cook Islands has them, and Nevis, and they do actually exist. And we're not like some weird phenomenon. Private foundations are a legitimate foundation. It's just that the ATO don't accept them as being effective to minimise tax. That's all. So if you're not using it for that, absolutely, it's no problem whatsoever. It may not be the best structure to protect your assets, but it's still a better one than having it in your own name. It's just if you're trying to use it and claim you're tax exempt when the Australian tax law clearly says otherwise, that's when you hit a problem.
Which is fair enough, I believe. But yeah, it'll be interesting with this because let's say the people that have set it up with the motive or the agenda to evade tax, I guess you can say, or collect income from it, people who are doing it for that purpose who are going to be targeted by it, what penalties do you think they actually could face if they're caught?
I've helped clients before who've been caught by this. Promoters can actually get heavily fined, and even if they really want to be nasty, they can jail them, but they can certainly fine them pretty heavily and ban them from doing it. People, just normal people, they normally just take them to court, reassess all their income. It's normally quite nasty. And yeah, I've helped people before. They just get a horrible tax bill with lots and lots of penalties. That's generally what happens.
Yeah, massive tax bill, no surprise. So that's the main consequence, if you had to summarize, is you'll get hit with a massive tax bill.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like, I mean, look, in theory, they can jail you as well if they think what you're doing is tax evasion or something. But I haven't really seen that happen with private foundations. They more just think you're an idiot and they hit you with a heavy penalty for doing it. That's what I've always seen them do.
Yeah. So that's it's no secret they're going to hit people financially if they catch you in the act trying to evade taxes or anything like that. But I know you've shared stories on other topics, not really on private foundations, but more around credit card debts and people chasing them for money. But if you bring that same concept to people who are getting caught using private foundations for the wrong reasons and against the ATO's agenda and compliance rules, what about the mental toll it has on people? Because obviously financially they'll get hit massively, but from your experience, do you see the whole people going through the whole process of investigation, does it take a mental toll on them as well?
It's horrific. I remember back in 2013 having a client come and see me who was an accountant who literally was almost suicidal because she'd gone through an Operation Wickenby for using offshore companies to move money, and based on what she'd been shown by an accountant. And I can remember a guy who got targeted by ASIC in 2000 for operating on licensed investment schemes. You know, absolutely hammered them, absolutely, like they were distraught. It's very stressful. I mean, I'm mentally tough, but my first investigation I went through, I was quite stressed, you know, I found it hard. And then gradually I got better at it because I do have legal knowledge. And as you know, I'm a bit of a crazy guy. I'm mentally not afraid of a fight. But most people aren't. Most people are just good, innocent business people who are just very angry at the tax system. They set it up because someone says they can do it and gives them some golden goose silver bullet. They think, you little ripper. They do it and just don't think the consequences through of what they've done. And it's all well and good if they never get looked at, but most people don't realize the consequences of what can happen to them. And the fact that theoretically, and look, people ask me, do private foundations work in theory? Yeah, they do work in theory. I mean, in theory, private foundations, private member associations, whatever else you want to set up, they work in theory, you know, but in practice, the ATO don't accept them unless they're registered foundations. So all I say to people is if you want to stand by your theory, you're welcome to. Just make sure you're ready to go to court and ready to fight hard and you're up for a fight, because the ATO aren't going to sit there and shake your hand and say, yeah, all sounds good to me. They won't do that. They've made that very clear, crystal clear in their recent position paper, but they do not accept this. So if people feel, it's a little bit like the COVID vaccine debacle that went on, you know, in previous years. So, you know, there was a COVID vaccine debacle where literally it was just ridiculous. Like people were being coerced into taking an unproven remedy, and in theory, there's no way they should be allowed to do it, but they did it and they got away with it. And so it all comes, and for centuries of history, it all comes down to the stronger party. And the ATO is stronger than most people. They've got resources. They're funded by the IMF. They've got an army to go after you of auditors and, legal things and public opinion. So, yeah, take them on if you're really game. And if you do, my hat comes off to you. You're an unusually amazing individual. There's no way I'd do it.
Do you think an individual can actually take the ATO? Because they've obviously got resources behind them. They've got capital and government funding clearly. But if you're an individual trying to argue it, what chance do you think you actually stand against them? Because you'd think if you're an individual, you wouldn't really have much chance yourself. And even if you pay top dollars for a lawyer, do you think do you have much of a shot?
Oh, look, in theory, a tennis player who's ranked number 700 in the world, who plays on private grass courts over in Australia, could beat Novak Djokovic. And, but you'd be a pretty game person to bet on that person beating Djokovic in a game. Djokovic would have to break his leg and be injured and all kinds of stuff. So, in theory, it's possible. But the only people I ever generally see who beat the ATO are people who are working within the system, number one. They've got very, very good lawyers and they've got deep pockets. So if you can be the first to not be like that, I want to hear your story. So.
Yeah, well, everyone can see the consequences. And obviously, I know if I had a private foundation for and they were set up for the reasons you mentioned that's non-compliant and seen as a threat to the ATO, I know I'd be nervous myself and I'd be doing everything I can to make sure I'm not going to get investigated or caught out. But it's easy to announce you're going to crack down and target or investigate foundations, but how do you think they're actually going to go about it? Are they just suddenly going to investigate heaps of different people and look into it, or
how are
they actually going to do that?
In 2015, they did it with a particularly big promoter of private foundations. They just served a notice on them, forced them to hand over all their client lists, and these guys had always promised their clients they'd never do that. But when they got threatened with, seizing their assets and arresting them, they quickly did it. And they'll just simply order under Section 264 to get a copy of the client list of these private promoters, and they'll just take it from there, really. So, and look, I will mention one other thing. Years ago, I had a private foundation and was running a church through it, and the ATO did actually ring me and said, "You're supposed to have it registered." And I just said at the time, "No, I'm not going to do it." And I just hung up on them after I had a bit of a chat with them. But like I said, number one, I knew what I was doing. I knew the law really, really well. And secondly, briefly afterwards, I thought, you know what? It's just too hard. There's so many things you can't do with a private foundation. It's difficult to open bank accounts now, everything. Why not just register a foundation publicly and do it properly? And that's what I did. And I've never looked back.
Yeah, you've obviously made that switch, and I think you would definitely be glad you did when you see announcements like that. And you've probably helped a lot of clients too. Like, how many clients have you helped roughly that originally had a private foundation set up that would probably be thanking you after this recent announcement?
Well, hopefully a few. A lot of people I think are safe from doing it because I'm going to use it. And almost everyone who's come to me, what's interesting is I hear the same story. They said, "I've got one, I just don't feel comfortable. Like, I've used it or I've hardly used it." But why? They said, "I don't know, something doesn't feel right about it." They said, I want to do it. I don't like taxes. What's your view on it? And I just tell them, they go, "You know what? You've confirmed it." So I've said this to them, "Look, in theory, what you're told is correct. You're just going to be willing to go to court and hold your ground because the ATO will not accept that." So he said, "Really?" So the ATO, what? And they go, "Okay." Because they said, "That's what we thought." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Of course the ATO don't accept it." I'm saying, so as long as you're willing to go to court and fight for this, you can. And I said, in theory, you have a point. Like, in theory, people who are coerced into vaccination should have walked into the federal court and they should have won their cases hands down and got damages, but no one has from what I've seen, because you got a corrupt system, unfortunately. So sometimes when you're in a corrupt system, you've either got to go live off grid or you learn to work within it. That's how I see it. Like, I don't like the system. I don't like it one little bit. I can't stand it. It's why I built the Global Wealth Club. It's why I built Wealth Safe, because I can't stand it. I think it's corrupt as heck. I think it's disgusting. I don't like it at all. I think Australia's taxes are ridiculous on the average person. I said that publicly when the ABC interviewed me in the Panama Papers in 2016. When I was challenged by the ABC, they said, why do you help, people avoid tax? And I'm like, well, the day that Google and Facebook start paying 1% or paying more than 1%, then maybe I'll stop. But I said, until then, you can't tell me it's fair, but small businesses get roped into what they're paying right now. It's ridiculous. I said, so I'll happily help clients as long as it's in the law. And they go, we can't argue that response. So I still feel the same. I think that the current system is ridiculous. I mean, it is what it is. I don't believe in whinging and carrying on about something and not doing something about it. It's just a waste of time. But that's why I prefer to take action, do something about it. But I think we all agree the system is just gross. It's disgusting. That's why people go into private foundations, because it really is unfair. It's a rort. And people deep down in their hearts know that the money is not being used for the right reasons by the government. As Kerry Packer said, he said, the reason that I legally minimize my tax, because I don't avoid it, I minimize it, but I will never pay you guys a penny more than I'm legally required to, because you certainly aren't looking after my money that well, and I'll give you any extra money. And I love that response. I thought that was one of the great responses by Kerry Packer, basically F you, I'll pay you what I have to legally, but don't you dare come trying to tell me I shouldn't be trying to legally minimize my tax, because I'll do it. So that's where I sympathize with private foundation owners. I can understand why people have done it. I think the motivation is just, and I think it's most people do it for the right reasons. They just want to run their businesses, do investments, help their families, and not basically be unfairly shafted by the ATO, while everyone else around them, they just watch the big companies walk away and pay nothing. They see the Catholic Church pay nothing. They see everyone else pay nothing. So they're like, well, screw this, Here we are working our asses off 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and I've got a mortgage to pay, cost of living shot up, the houses prices are shot up, fuel costs are gone up, food costs are shot up, can barely get supplies anymore. And now you're asking me to, pay 10% GST as a business owner, and you're wanting me to pay some other tax on that, you want me to pay tax on advance, you want me to pay 30%, and there's more taxes if I pull money out of my company, and then if I have up to $1 million of wages in my company, you've got to pay payroll tax. Screw you. I think that's what most people feel who set up a private foundation, and I really don't blame them. I just say to people, look, I feel you. And if you believe strong enough, willing to fight, then go for it. I admire you. I'll be watching, cheering you on in the corner. But the better thing to do for me, unless you really are in that place, is to just find other ways of doing it, because there are legal ways of doing it without having to get into a path that's going to get you in and cause more stress to you and your family and put you in trouble.
Well, yeah, I agree with everything you said there. The definitely right, and I'm interested to hear everyone listening today. Is anyone kind of in that position where you relate to what was just said? So you've got one set up, you did it for a certain reason, but now you're just not sure and not feeling safe. Is there anyone that's kind of in that position at the moment, just out of curiosity?
Looks like nobody is there.
Yeah, clearly not. Yeah, Carol.
Carol,
So yeah, we've
one person.
Yeah, well,
Everyone else is perfectly fine, so it's good.
Everyone else must be tuning in for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, we'll move on to the next question. Pretty much for the people that do have private foundations, whether they're listening in today, but we're just too shy to comment, or for those who are listening to the replay, what actually would be the best way to go about it? Like, let's just say you are in that position and you originally set it up because you felt like you were being unfairly treated. You see everyone else around you and the wealthy paying no taxes, and you feel like you're getting screwed over by the system. But you now realize you've probably made the decision, I would say. You realize you made the decision that's probably not best for you and your family and putting your safety at risks. And you, instead of alternative solutions, rather than setting up a private foundation for that reason. So if you are in that position, what should you do right now to actually stay compliant and make sure you don't get into trouble, while also maintaining the benefits of why you set it up, which is obviously a bit more privacy and security and all?
It depends on how much you've used it. And if you haven't really put money through to minimize tax, you don't really have a problem with it. You just got to decide what's the best structure. If you have been doing that, you've really got two choices, or three choices. One is keep doing it and hope you don't go and get caught. One is shut it down now and just hope you don't get caught for the past. And number three is shut it down now and clean up the past and just do things properly for the future. That's your three options, really.
Yeah. What about if you were considering those options and you made a decision for yourself? I think a lot of people would struggle to understand the difference between private and public, especially if they're new to this whole space of foundations, because like you mentioned, there's plenty of different solutions around it. You can't always go on, educate yourself. You can obviously look at even setting up a public foundation like what you've done yourself and a lot of clients you've helped do to make sure they don't get caught out. You can obviously stick with private, but more specifically for people who are kind of unsure what they need to do and want to get educated so they can make the right decision for themselves, where would you recommend they start learning and actually take time to educate themselves? Is there any good place you'd recommend for some learning to get familiar with public and private foundations and how to make the best decisions?
It's really difficult. I mean, we do provide some videos, of course, at the Global Wealth Club. So people go into the free videos and look at the structure side of things. There is something on private foundations and public. So I think we've done about 7-minute videos. So that can always help people and give them a bit of a start. Otherwise, yeah, look, I mean, I haven't really found any major websites that are particularly better and things like that. So there are, of course, you can always just type in public versus private in Google, and Google is the best search engine of anything. You'll find countless articles if you do that. I mean, I might just quickly share my screen and that will enable people to, just for a brief minute, if that's okay, Ed. And what you got here is our education. Then when you click on that, you've got free. And the free one then will take you eventually, yep. Then you just sign up and get a free membership, basically, and you can go through this, and you've got the Keeping Your Wealth free trainings, and one of them is Introduction to Types of Structures. And when you click on that, one of the courses or little modules you can do for free is Foundations. So basically Foundations. So Carol said, you're looking very tanned. Yes, I've been living on the beach and water, Carol, so.
Yeah, you would certainly hope you get tanned if you've been on the beach all day in tropical weather. I've kind of escaped the heat wave in Perth. Went down to Albany because despite me being Filipino, I don't like the heat. Don't know how everyone else feels about it, but I just don't like the heat. But anyway, back to the topic. Back to the topic. We just had a question come through from Isabella. While on the topic of foundations, can our charity registered with ASIC and ACNC be changed into a public foundation so we can get away with director's ID?
Okay, let me have a squizzle at that.
So it's just in the comments section.
So Isabella, yeah, I'm reading it. If it's already registered with the ASIC and ACNC, then it doesn't. Then basically it's a public foundation. But I think maybe the question's worded wrongly. So yeah, look, I mean, that is one way to avoid director's ID is set up a foundation, register it with ASIC and the ACNC, and just look. We've done quite a few podcasts on the director's ID, Isabella. If you go into the YouTube channel, even about a week ago, there was a aftermath of director's ID one. And then back in November, I did a couple of ones. So if you watch those, they help. And the one last week shows some alternative structures that you can set up. So yeah, some alternative structures that you can set up. So, and alternative ways to get around the director's ID and things like that. And in terms of closing a foundation, yeah, you just empty the funds accounts, then take a meeting minutes to the bank to close. Someone's written, that's pretty much on the mark. So correct, yes.
Yeah, closing, and I'm pretty sure if you guys check out the videos as well on the phrase site, where you, in the introduction to types of structures on the phrase site, you'll find some tips on there That's more focused around public versus private foundations and helping you understand structures. In terms of closing a private foundation, like you just said there, you just empty the funds accounts and then take the meeting minutes to the bank to close. You just mentioned that's accurate. And then, yeah, but I suggest firstly watch the videos on our free trainings. That will just really help you understand the principles and the basics behind public and private, because that's really important to understand. It'll be a really good follow-on from today's interview. You'll find a lot of value from them and then be able to come back with any questions you have. But before we actually go into different ways to keep getting educated on foundations, we also had someone email through a couple of questions to our team, and it'll be a good time to answer them here. So I've just got them on my computer here, so they won't be on the chat for you. But the first question is, if closing a foundation bank account, how is the best way to get funds out without raising red flags if it's a large amount?
Yeah, it's a hard question, really. I mean, if you just start taking, money moves and twitches around all the time. So it depends on how you move it out. If you just start doing bank transfers and things like that around Australia, it doesn't really cause red flags as a rule. It's only if you start transferring large amounts overseas. So, I regularly transfer large amounts, and within Australia, never have any problem with it. So it's only like going overseas in some situations can raise a red flag.
Does closing a foundation bank account automatically close the foundation as well, or just the bank account?
No, you close the bank account. The foundation still exists. You got to just someone called Jack put a note in there saying you just stop a meeting minute and you just wind up through that. And generally an accountant can help you do that anyway. Just see the accountant and they can normally help you.
Yeah. And obviously after this announcement, there's been a lot of sometimes when you see an announcement, either you've got to move really fast, or sometimes you can kind of take your time. I know you're a big believer in always moving fast, and even if it may not necessarily be needed, you always believe in moving faster, just because taking action is better and really important, especially when you have a world like ours today with governments doing whatever they want and the elite doing what they want. But how urgent do you think it actually is for people to wind up a private foundation if they have concerns about scrutiny?
Oh, it depends on your personality type for me. As soon as I get worried about something like that, I'll just move quick. I either solve my worry or shut down. I don't like lingering worry. It's a horrible feeling. So to me, once you get looked at, it's too late. So depending, the agent might not ever look at you, or they might be months away, or tomorrow you might be one of the unlucky ones to get a notice. You don't know. So if you don't feel comfortable with it, shut it down.
Yeah. So pretty much if you have any feeling of uncertainty and you want to sort it out as quick as you can, I know I'd be the same as you. If I feel uncertain at all, that uncertainty will impact everything else I'm doing, and if it's on the back of my mind. So solving it sooner than later is always important.
Yeah.
But that's all the questions I had. Does anyone else have any questions that you want to ask? Especially if you have private foundations, this is your time to get as much as you can out of this, to get as much clarity as you can. We just had a question come through. Is associations the same as a foundation?
Oh, not really. That's a whole different legal question, really. It's just, it kind of is a foundation. A foundation is just a charitable body, so to speak, and association is just one of the ways you can do a foundation. I think it's the best way to describe it. Like if you look up state, but generally associations set up in specific states. So like New South Wales, you set up a New South Wales local association to do some kind of thing. That's normally what they're for.
Yeah. But while people are putting their question, here we are. Do you pay tax if a foundation is public?
No. Well, the foundation doesn't pay tax, but individuals may or may not, depending on the type of foundation you set up.
Yeah, and to answer that question as well, if you check out the free trainings, those get answered, because there's different types of foundations. There's different types of foundations you can set up publicly, and depending on which one you go with, there's different tax laws around it. So the best answer that we can give to that is just check out the free trainings, the introduction to types of structures on the free module. When you scroll down, it's in the third section, I believe, keeping your assets safe. And that will give you really good insight to a mixture of things around foundations, like tax laws around it, and what they are, pros and cons of each, and things like that. You'll take out a lot of value.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, so just the best way to think of it, Carol, is foundations themselves are tax exempt, no matter what type individuals involved the foundations may or not be. So next question. Yeah, what's the difference between a private foundation and a private trust structure? I mean, well, a foundation claims to be charitable, while a trust is still for private wealth. So like the Cook Islands, you can set up private trust, for example. That's very common over there and very popular, or Nevis private trusts. So where they're not really registered, they're protected, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, they're just more about individual wealth, whereas a foundation's more about charitable wealth. So someone asked about my opinion on not-for-profit association if it's under the umbrella foundation. Exactly the same deal, really. I mean, the question is it a registered foundation with the ACNC and the ATO? If it is, it's public and you don't have a problem. If it's not registered and you're claiming it gives you tax benefits, for example, if you got a prop, then yeah, it's not accepted. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be association, it could be a not-for-profit association, it could be a private members, it could be a Satanist association, it could be a corporation sole, or love trust, or whatever else you want to call it. You can give it, people can give it many labels and good marketing, but it's still the same principle. So Isabella asks, would we have to close our charity and open a new public foundation? Generally, yes. I mean, it depends on the foundation. Would we have to go through ACNC? Yes, you would. And the ACNC don't give a crap about directors' ID or not. It doesn't bother them. It's not their concern. That's an ASIC one. So it's not an issue. But yes, you have to get it registered with ACNC and ATO. I mean, we do help people with that process if they want that.
Yeah, and we'll get to that shortly. And next question here from Mariah is, we've just closed our bank account and taken out the small amount of money in there. So is the next step to see an accountant and ask them to close the foundation?
Yes, that's correct. So that would be easy. That's the correct thing. Brady says PMAs seem to be latest and greatest promoted. What is your thoughts for Australia? I've already answered that question. I don't think I could be any clearer, Brad, than saying it doesn't matter what label you give it. People can call it whatever they want, so can't be clearer than that. If it's registered with the ATO and the ACNC, no problem. If it's not, the ATO won't like it. They've made that very clear. So, I mean, who knows? They might get away with it, but like I'm saying, you're taking a gamble that you won't get looked at.
Yeah, definitely. So these are all good questions. So thanks for asking them. Yeah, giving really good insight into different things. And the accountant shouldn't be touching anything fully in the private. Is that correct?
Well, in theory, but I mean, an accountant will help you shut it down if you need to. You see an accountant if you want to shut it down. So, and I do know accountants who work in the private. So,
yeah. While people are putting their questions through, just quickly, because you mentioned before about that we do offer help around that. So, what's the best way if someone's looking to close a private foundation and possibly even consider getting in the public space? What's the best way they can get in contact with our team and talk about different solutions?
Best thing to do, a couple of options. Let me just share my screen. Brad says you're a legend. Thanks, Brad. That's very kind of you to say that. I said it about Michael Jordan too. I just can't play basketball quite as well as he can play.
Yeah, almost at the level, but not quite, right?
A little bit short, getting there. Yeah, best thing to do. I mean, we've got that there, but if you really do want specific help, we do have an inquire button over here. But if you just click on the inquire button, you'll get a bit of a form, which you got here. You can book this here and just complete the details here. Your first name, last name, email, phone, city, state, how long you've been following us next, and then just go from there. And then one of our team will reach you out, and we have a lovely team. We have the lovely Jasmine, we have the lovely Grace, who's our director, who's here tonight. You know, we have a great team and many who are there who would be very, very excited and very pleased to serve you and help you with this. So let me have a look. Some accountants want me web structure. Yeah, that's correct. I would agree with that. Isabella, how much is your fee if we wanted to help change from a charity from company to foundation? Yeah, that's like asking about, you know, how much it costs to buy a car. There's so many factors, Isabella. So the best thing to do is reach out. Once you speak to one of our team, they can work out, you know, what's going to be best for you. Because we may, if we can't help you, we'll just tell you. If we can, then we'll obviously, you know, quote you at the time.
Yeah, I'll just put the link there in the chat for those of you that do want to look into that. I will mention as well, if you're looking for more education before you want to get our assistance or anyone's assistance with changing over, or just general guidance around this whole foundation space, the best starting point is with the free trainings if you haven't seen those already, or if you don't really have much of an understanding of foundations, just because it's really important to actually be educated before you're going into making a decision around this. We've had many clients that have watched those videos and given really good feedback, and it's helped them make the right decision for themselves, because you may realize that changing over may not be necessary for you, or you may realize that it's actually more important than you realized. And once you've watched those videos, it will give you really good insight. Or if you're more ready to actually talk to our team and you know it's right for you, then the link there's, if you want to check it out, the inquiry link. And like we said, one of our team will be in contact with you, and it'll be a really smooth process. So any final questions from anyone before we wrap things up? I've really enjoyed this, and it's been really good tonight, because the whole announcement that recently came out, I wouldn't say it's surprising, but it did kind of take me by surprise in a way, just because you've been talking about it for a while, and actually seeing it happen is a whole different story compared to when you're just like kind of guessing it will happen. When you're just predicting, actually seeing it happen is a whole new ball game.
Generally, my observation is most people don't really think things through and predict. And I think a good example of that was when I was watching the whole COVID thing. You remember, Ed, I was predicting what the government were going to do almost every step of the way. And people said, how are you doing it? And I just was really just going on statistical data on human behavior. And I said, well, if I was the government, because I always say, well, if I was them and I wanted to get everyone jabbed with whatever that with this little thing to track them or whatever else you want to do, how would I do it? And I thought, well, pretty easy, really. I mean, Australians rely heavily on their money. You just pay, it's a big thing for Australians. Australians will yell that they'll stand their ground and they won't give up. But, you know, most Australians will give in. When I looked at polling statistics, like 40% of Australians were very pro, you know, taking any kind of needle jab. 35 to 40% were generally, depending on case by case, and about 25% were very against it. So I said, well, based on those statistics, 80% will get it, because 75 to 80% will get it. To me, it was very straightforward. And I said the 40% group will jump at it. They'll be yelling for it, and they'll be wanting everyone else who hasn't taken it to take it. There'll be 20% yelling that no one should take it. And then there'll be 40% in the middle who'll be whinging and very upset about the coercion, but they'll give in once they realize they can't travel and once they can't do things. And that's what happened. It was really relatively straightforward. And the other thing I remember saying was, when I did some research, I could not find a single vaccine mandate in history where they'd ever gone more than 6 months. So I thought, okay, well, it'll probably last 6 months. So everyone was saying it could go for a long time, and people were giving in eventually. I mean, many people were angry. But you remember, it lasts exactly 6 months. And for example, West Australia, in most places, it lasted for short times. Because I said, well, logic tells me they just want to make sure that they push 80% into it. And once you get the 80%, they've got the relative, you know, masses doing it. So it's the same kind of deal with this stuff. To me, the private foundations was fairly easy to be predicted. It's governments, COVID's finished. The government's had a bit of a holiday in COVID from collecting money. ATO backed off. ATO now going to make up for lost time. So they're going feral to collect money. Anyone who owes them money on debt, they're calling them, they're sending them letters. So they're going to start thinking, well, else can we get money? Okay, well, private foundations, banks. So to me, they'll just hit anything naughty that people are doing. Easy.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's a whole new ball game seeing it happen. And while we're on that topic, do you know what you think they'll go after next? What's your next prediction, your next big prediction?
Gosh, it's a hard one now. I've always predicted just about most things pretty accurately. Offshore, I predicted when they did that, and various other ones. Look, I think they're going to just really target people who owe money. Small business debt, I think they'll keep themselves very busy with that, along with private foundations. I think they will target superannuation fund breaches at some stage too, but I don't think it's a big one. They'll just do that in bits and pieces. I do think at some stage, I'm not quite sure how they're going to do it, they're going to target family trusts. And I don't think they're going to stop them because too many politicians and farmers use them. And so whenever they try to do that, I think we're just going to scare people more. Like they released a ruling that really scared everyone. But when I read the fine print, the ruling really wasn't saying an awful lot different to what's been going on, apart from a couple of things they said you can't do. Just about everything else was really the same, but they put it in scary language. So I think that they'll do a lot of that. I think the private foundations is an obvious one. It's an easy target, easy fix to get money. Things like offshore is another easy fix, but they've exhausted that one. They've scared most people away from that. So they're going to be very busy with small business debts and things like that. I think super fund breaches, like I said, is possibly another one that they can do. Apart from that, really, there's not a lot other. I think they by and large got the system. So then I think they'll start making things up. And that's when it's going to get interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So there'll be a lot to keep an eye on then, because I remember that the family trust announcement they made and people were scared all over the place, and now private foundations being the new thing. You've been saying superannuation for a while, and Stephen, on one of the economy updates, I think it was last week, actually mentioned that they're now even talking about it. So it'll be really interesting to see that space and how it evolves around superannuation.
Where there's money, they'll be coming. That's the rule of thumb.
Yeah, it's that simple. But that pretty much wraps it up. Seems like there's no questions coming through. And right as I say that, looks like there was one that just came through. It's from Isabella. You said that ACNC don't care about director's ID. We were told that once the company was set up with ASIC, we would never have to deal with ASIC. Everything is being dealt with ACNC. Would you say that because of that, our directors wouldn't have to have those IDs?
If you've got a company, you'll have to have it. It's just if you've got a foundation with ACNC, you may not need to have a company structure. But if you have a company with ASIC, you will have to get the director's ID. You know, they own the sandpit, they'll make the rules.
Yeah, and for those who are concerned about the director's ID, the best way to learn more about it, to keep this one on topic, is to check out our YouTube channel, because we have done some videos on that and some trainings. We did the most recent one being last week. You'll find it pretty much close to the top of our YouTube page. So just search Global Wealth Club on YouTube and you'll find a director's ID training right there. Then if you scroll down a little further to around November, you'll find the original one we did, which will give you really good insight and different solutions you can consider around the director's ID if that's a concern of yours. So you'll find a lot of value in that. But that pretty much wraps things up. So the last thing I'll mention, like I've mentioned throughout this interview, is that do check out the free trainings if this is something you're looking to do. If you've got a private foundation, if you're in the situation that Warren was talking about earlier, where you feel nervous and or uncertain and you want to find a solution around it to make sure you're not scared or you're not getting hammered or anything like that, then make sure to check those free trainings out, because that'll give you a really good starting point and insight into how you can get started and make the right decision for yourself. And if you're looking for a more direct solution, actually want to talk to us about getting our assistance, then just fill out an inquiry and then one of our team will be in contact with you. So that's pretty much it from me. Did you have any final words to finish this off?
No final words. Just I hope that served everyone and that people got a bit of an idea what to do from here.
So yeah, appreciate everyone showing up. Been really good to get your feedback and your comments come through, and really great to see the engagement. Great to have you on here, Warren. You're obviously in Bali right now, so I'm sure everyone appreciates your time while you're on holiday and relaxing. So thanks again, guys, and we'll see you guys next week at the next trainings, or if anything comes up over this week, we'll see you there. If you have any questions, reach out to support@globalwealthclub.com. And then our team will be in touch. So see you guys next time.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.